I just wanted to share with you our mission statement, which is that we're dedicated to collecting, understanding, and enjoying American art. And we're celebrating the creativity of artists whose work reflect America, it's the American experience, and connections beyond our country. So as educators at the Smithsonian, our goal is to bring this collection to you, to your students, to Americans across the country, to people around the world. And so Becky and I, our particular part of that mission is to lead our distance learning programs. And specifically today, we want to talk about our Artful Connections distance learning program. So we have a few goals for today. Our first goal is to talk about how Artful Connections works. So what is this program? What would it be like if you decide to participate in it in your classroom? And then we want to talk about what it can offer. So what content do we have to share? And then we also want to share with you some other digital resources that we have. So we have resources beyond just the Artful Connections program that we're going to share with you at the end of our presentation. So I'd like to hand it over to Becky to talk a little bit about what Artful Connections is.
Yes, so Artful Connections is our by request free distance learning offerings. We have 11 different topics that you can request. They range in subject matter from art, history, and heritage topics, and we'll get more into those in a moment. But they are, as I said, free programs offered during the school day for one class and one volunteer presenter who actually teaches your lesson. We use artwork specifically from the Smithsonian American Art Museum's collection. So even though the Smithsonian is huge, we focus just on the artworks in our collection. And weave together a conversation about the particular topic that you have requested. We'll have a lot of interaction during the program, asking students to look at artworks, analyze them, and share their thoughts and observations about them as we work together as a group to understand what we're seeing and relate it to the theme that's being discussed. They range in length from 40 to 60 minutes based on what works for you with the class time that you've got available. And we offer them based on the timing that works well for you. So if you have a 40-minute class that you meet with 3 times a week and you want us to meet with all 3 of those sessions, you put the requests in, and whatever time frame you meet with that class is when we would connect with you. These days we are very flexible with the kind of equipment that we use. We do prefer to use Zoom, but we can also use any kind of connection platform from Meet to Teams to WebEx. We will connect with what works for you and your students, and look forward to sharing more with you the subject matter that we cover. So we can go to the next slide. As many of you have experienced, the video conference experience is a lot like this. We connect with you right now from our homes. Staff have not returned to the museum yet. Volunteers also haven't returned to the museum. So we share our artworks on PowerPoint slides through screen share, and we are live with you, one class, as I said, to one presenter. So you get all of our attention. Your students get a lot of opportunities to interact with us, share their observations. And so it's a really engaging conversation. Next slide, Allie. And those conversations, as I said, fall into 3 different buckets. So we can cover history topics if you're looking for ways to integrate what you're doing in the art room with other subjects they may be covering in class. We can do any of the 4 exploring history topics on Young America, Lure of the West, Civil War, or social commentary and social action. We can also do more art-specific conversations. We don't do art making, but we do look at materials and kind of processes. So we can examine To See is to Think, which is visual literacy, America's signs and symbols, found object artworks, or contemporary craft. And then we also have 3 topics that celebrate different heritage months that you might come across throughout the year. Our collection is particularly strong in artworks by African-American artists, artworks by American Indian artists, as well as works about American Indians. And then we can also cover Latino art and culture. And so to give you a sense today for what you might experience if you request a program, you've got your class connected to us, we thought we would give you a demonstration, an abbreviated demonstration of a couple of these topics, and then give you a chance to ask questions about any of the other topics that you see on this slide here. So we ask you to put your participation student hats on. And we will start with contemporary craft work, since you all are art folks. And this also, this particular topic pulls a lot from the collection at the Renwick, which is our second building, which focuses mainly on craft and design. And so we'll give you a little taste of that. As we go, Allie's going to lead us through the artworks. I'll keep an eye on the chat, but you're also welcome to raise your hand to participate with the questions that we'll be asking. So
Great.
Here you go, Allie.
Thanks, Becky. So as Becky just said, I'm going to do a little bit of both discussing what we would do and also asking you all to be our students today. So a little bit of modeling of what kind of experience you might get if you were to request a contemporary craft lesson from us. So let's jump right in. So I've just put a question on the screen here about the word craft. So if I say the word craft to you, what are some things that come to your mind? And again, either in the chat or unmute or raise your hand, whatever your standard for participation is in this circle, it works with us.
Thank you, Kathy. She says mixed media. Chris says homemade.
Great.
Steven says weaving. So thinking about particular media.
So thinking about the materiality of what we're talking about. Great. Have any of you ever done any crafts? Anything that you would consider to be a craft? What might those things be?
We've got basket weaving, needlepoint.
Yeah, definitely. I was just speaking to Becky earlier about how I have started to embroider. I see we have embroidery go by. Something that's sometimes considered to be a craft.
Ooh, stained glass. Yeah.
Interesting. So lots of things that one might do with their hands, things about different materials that you're working with. I'm going to show you a picture of an artwork. Would you say that this is an example of a craft? And if you say yes, why would you say that? And I see the words folk art went by in the chat. I'm curious if Jen, if you'd like to elaborate a little bit on why you say you consider it folk art. That's an interesting phrase to contribute.
I think that actually popped up while we were still
in the previous question.
Ideas, yes, when she thinks of craft. There we go. Sarah says, anything not painting, sculpture, or drawing in college was in the craft department. So this is a craft.
So we're thinking about categorizing and how different institutions have broken down art into different buckets.
Mhm. Yeah, Shanna also is thinking along those lines. She says it fits the criteria of handmade and functional.
Right. So now we're starting to work around a definition. What is craft?
Handmade for a purpose, made to a certain standard, Stephen says.
Interesting.
Yes, it's woven and it involves ancient skills.
Interesting. So we're circling around materiality. We're circling around the effort that it takes to go into this. And so this is where we start to come down to a question of, is there a division between art and craft? And I think it's hard for us to answer that question, especially right at the beginning of a lesson. So that's why we're going to continue to explore more craft artwork together. And art can be something that's a free expression of creativity, but so can craft. And craft can be something that's functional and that is, takes a high level of skill to create, but art can be functional as well. So there's a blurred line there that I think we're going to see in our next two objects. So I have a challenge for you. I've covered up most of this artwork, but based on what you see, what do you think this thing might be?
Ooh, I can tell you're art teachers. A raku pot or a vase, an urn, pottery, a ceramic vessel, a water vessel.
Great. Okay.
A teapot.
So you're thinking about both the material and its use and some kind of a vessel. Let me take away something from this. What do we think it might be now? One of you is already getting there.
Mm-hmm. A face jug. Ooh, very interesting.
Oh, a face jug. Let me add even more information. So now that I've revealed this whole artwork, I'd like to ask the students to think, this might be something that you're familiar with, that you've seen a billion times, that you know what this shape is, and you might not have thought about why it looks like this. But why does it need to have that handle? Why does it need to have that spout? Why does it have these parts to it? And the answer is so that it is functional, right? So this is a functional object, but it's also an art object. It also has aesthetic value to it, but it needs to function. And then we like to show them this next artwork. So here's just a picture of the artist who made it. His name is Paul Soldner. We like to show them this artwork. And then I like to ask, what is this? What are we looking at here? All right, so if you said that this is another teapot, how do we know?
We've got some other words coming in: assemblage and a form. Interesting. So it's the form that tips you off that is the same thing that we saw before.
Right. So we're
spout
seeing
and
that
a
it
handle.
has spout and a handle. It has those same functional parts, but the aesthetic quality of them is very different. I love that word assemblage, that it has this pieced together quality to it. And when we compare it to this previous teapot that we were just looking at, something is very different about the priorities of the two different artists making these. And the black teapot that I've just put up on the screen, it's called Diesel Teapot. And it's intended as a bit of a joke. So once I've put that word out there, diesel, now this object might remind you of something else that you might be familiar with. And we can show students an image if we want to focus in on this joke. But we have an artist here who's referencing filling your car up with gas, just like you might pour tea out of a teapot. And so it's called a diesel teapot because it's something that's combining two different objects into something that wouldn't be functional, right? Like we couldn't use this to put gas in our car. We could probably use it for tea, but then why does it have to look the way that it is? So we're starting to play with the definition of art and craft here. And I think that students really get it when we talk about the humor of this object, that it's art and it's also a joke and it's also something that you can actually use. So it really skirts that line there. And I'm going to move to talk about a different medium now. So this is one example of how we can explore pottery, ceramics with your students. But we can also look at glass works. And this is a really interesting work of art that we have in our collection that might not look like much at first, but there's something really interesting that you can do with this artwork. So what do we see within the glass case? So everything within the glass case is part of the artwork.
A torch, possibly, on the left.
Yeah, so we've got a torch. That is a torch. And there's some other things we've got in there.
Glass cylinders. Thank you,
Okay.
Sarah.
So a whole
Lots of
different
tubes.
assortment of glass tubes and cylinders of different sizes. And it might not look like it, but this is actually an artwork that can be used to make sound. And so we'd like to share with the students a video of this artwork being played. So I'm just going to really quickly switch my screen share to that video. So here we have a video of the artist who made this, who is a Korean immigrant named Bo Hun-yoon, playing this artwork. Can you all hear that? Okay. So we'll show, about a minute, 30 seconds of our video. And then I like to ask, why might I have labeled this artwork as craft? Why did I include this in this collection of craft artworks? What do you think? How does it fit with the things that we've discussed make up a craft?
Sarah says the simplest answer is because it's glass.
All right, so one idea would be returning to the material that's used.
Kaylee says it functions.
So that it's a functional object. I'd also like to ask what we can learn from this artwork. And that's a good opportunity for us to explain a little bit of the science behind it to the students, where we can talk about how this artwork functions by heating up air that vibrates a very small little wire that's actually inside the tube. And so it's a good opportunity to talk about physics and how science can interact with art as well. Oh, I'm loving this comment that it qualifies as performance art. So one question that I also like to ask is, do you agree with the label that this is craft, right? So I put this in here as craft. Do you think it's craft? And if you don't, why not? And what do you think it is? So maybe Sarah might say, this isn't craft, this is a performance art piece that's just using objects that have been created through a craft process. But it can fit into a lot of different categories. So it's a really great artwork for asking that question of what's a craft? Is this a craft? Do you think so? Or why not? So does anybody have any questions about this artwork or the teapots before I talk about our second lesson topic that we wanted to feature today? Okay. Then I wanted to move on after giving you a little snippet about some of the kind of questions and artworks we might talk about with our contemporary craft works. I wanted to move on to talking about our African-American artists topic. And this is especially popular in the month of February, African-American Heritage Month. But as Becky said, we have a really, really strong collection of artworks made by the African-American artists throughout America's history. A really strong collection of contemporary African-American artists. And so we're really able to touch on a lot of different topics within this category. So I'm going to do a little bit of both sort of more historic art and contemporary art today for you all. So I love to share this painting. And before telling students anything about it, I like to ask them, how would you describe this woman? What adjectives might you use to describe the woman that you're looking at here? So any thoughts? Here's a close-up of her.
Confident. Thank you, Kathy.
Great. So her pose giving off this air of confidence. I sometimes think of dignified when I look at her.
Ooh, Kaylee, important.
Important? I like to ask what she might be doing. What do we think she's doing in this artwork?
Sarah says she's poised. She's singing.
Great. Yeah, so we've got some clues we can pick on that she's singing or speaking into a microphone. And then also if we're focusing on civil rights, I love to ask students if they know where this takes place, which is in front of the Lincoln Memorial. So sometimes for classes that are studying civil rights at the time, and that's why they requested this, it might be fun to talk about the setting of this artwork. But something that's really great about this artwork is it's depicting a moment that we actually have video of. So this is an artwork that's showing us the singer Marion Anderson, who was a famous opera singer in the 1930s. She sang across Europe. She was internationally famous, but she faced discrimination here in the States because of her race, because she was African American. And so when she came to sing in Washington, D.C., she was supposed to sing at the DAR Constitution Hall, and she was not allowed in because of her race. And so instead, the First Lady, Eleanor Roosevelt, arranged for her to sing on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. And 75,000 people came to hear her sing. And she sang the song America, which we might know as My Country, 'Tis of Thee. So this is another instance where we're able to do some mixed media learning. And I like to share the video of her performance. So we've had an opportunity to look at an artistic depiction of her in painting. And then we can also listen to the sound of her singing. So let me switch over to that tab really quickly.
Genius
Sometimes this one's
draws
a
no
little quiet.
color line. And so it is fitting that Marion Anderson should raise her voice in tribute to the noble Lincoln whom mankind will ever honor. Miss Marion Anderson.
All right. So once we've had an opportunity to both watch the video and then also look at the painting, I love to ask students to think about what they learned about her from the two different artworks. So this painting is made by an African-American artist named William H. Johnson. And he made a whole series of artworks throughout his life of important Black Americans, Marion Anderson being one of them. And so I like to ask how he captured that moment. Do the students, what do they think the qualities that they saw in that video, what qualities do they think were captured in the painting versus what qualities were better brought out when they were able to hear the sound? And so we can have a conversation about the two different mediums of art. So both visual and auditory learning and looking with our eyes, and what things maybe the artist could capture that you can't see in the video, that he's really able to capture her attitude and her dignity and how powerful she is. And maybe you don't get that in just that grainy video clip. So it's both a really important person and a really interesting conversation about artistic mediums. Let's move on to a contemporary work of art that's also by an African-American artist named Kerry James Marshall. So this is a portrait that's really fun to break down and talk about different qualities of art. So I like to first ask students to think about what colors they see here in this artwork and what mood those colors create. So first we might talk through that, and I'll move through these a little bit, and we could talk more about some of the ones that are a little bit more complicated. But I like to ask about facial expression. So what do we see on her face? And that one is also sometimes interesting because some students say they struggle to see her face, and we can talk about why that might be. And then the question I kind of wanted to ask you all is about her pose, because I think her pose is really ambiguous. So what do we think about her pose? What impression does her pose give you when you look at this artwork? Any thoughts about the pose of the woman featured in this portrait? So I'll share what my impression of this pose is. And I've always felt that her pose to me looks a little bit uncertain, sort of, that she's kind of uncomfortable the way she's leaning. It makes me feel uncomfortable when I look at it. And I see that somebody in the chat is reminded of an artwork, Christina's World, that actually is what this is referencing, although it's not always something that we talk about if it's a big part of the story of this artwork, but sometimes we just talk about the way the artwork itself looks, but it is referencing Christina's World. So if that's something that your students are familiar with, that can be something interesting to bring in, that the artist is using that same pose from that artwork, but flipping it around and changing the identity of the person in the artwork. And then we also can explore the setting, that it's in some sort of an interior space, an ambiguous interior space. And then we can look at the book that's in front of her. And the title of that book is Africa Since 1413. And that's when we can reveal that all of those books on the bookcase actually have titles that are related to the continent of Africa. So African history, African culture, and that there's also something in those thought bubbles. So we know what this girl is thinking, and she's thinking the words sob, sob. Why do we think those might be her thoughts? We ask this after we've talked through what might the mood of this painting be. Why is it just her in this painting? How do we think she might be feeling based on her facial expression and her pose? And then we ask, why did Kerry James Marshall give her this thought, sob? And I'm curious if you have a thought about why that might have been the thing on this girl's mind. All right, well, my interpretation of that is certainly related to the topic of the books. I always think about how she might be feeling after she reads that history. Some students sometimes say that she wants to go back to Africa to explore her personal ancestry. Some students say maybe she is upset about feeling loss, we can really get into a deep conversation about why that might be in her thought bubble. After we've given the students an opportunity to explore the artist's choices here. So this is a great example of an artwork that's really great for talking about artists' choices, as well as for this theme of African-American artists, because Kerry James Marshall is a really significant contemporary African-American artist. And then just to zoom in on one more artwork by a contemporary African-American artist. This here is an artwork called Swing, and it's by the artist Sam Gilliam. And this is an opportunity where we might ask your students to do a little bit of art making. It's not something that we offer as a main part of our lessons, but sometimes our presenters will ask students to do a little drawing exercise or something like that, especially if you've talked about it with them in advance. And because this artwork was inspired by swing music, this is an artwork where we can play a clip of the song that inspired it, which is by John Coltrane, and ask students either what they might draw in response to that song or to make their own drawing in response to it, and then show this artwork and discuss why this artist might have come to this conclusion when he heard that song, and that this is the response that he made. And we can also talk about the artist himself and how he likes to make art that's experimental, that breaks color rules, and that uses materials in new, interesting ways, because this is such a unique format of art, these big drapey cloths here. So this is another example of an opportunity for mixed media learning, where we can bring different forms of art all together into one lesson for you. So I sort of zoomed in a little bit on those two topics, but as Becky said before, we do have 11 topics. And so we were wondering if there are any other topics that you're curious about that we could maybe just show an artwork for, talk a little bit about how we might approach those topics, or how the presenters might approach those topics if you were to request those. So I've put the list up on the screen. Is there anything that speaks to anyone in particular that they'd like us to open up for you? And again, you could just shout it out or put it in the chat.
I see found object artworks, Lure of the West, American Signs and Symbols, American Indians.
Great.
Basically,
Great,
all
lots
of them.
So then why don't we
Fantastic.
start? I think I just heard found objects go by. So why don't we just take a quick look at found objects? So here, again, this is just a shorter little dive into each of these, but here is one artist that our presenters love to talk about for found objects. And so we like to show this artwork and ask what students think it might be made of. Does anyone have a thought what it might be made of? What we're looking at material-wise?
Bottle caps.
Yes,
Buttons.
bottle caps. People will often say buttons or coins or different round objects, and we could sometimes zoom in and talk, then see more closely that they are indeed bottle caps. And this is a work of art by an artist who is named Mr. Imagination. His full name is Gregory Warmack. He's a self-taught artist, and he likes to make art, or he liked to make art out of things that he found on the street because they were free. And so it was sort of like both an easy opportunity that he didn't have to spend money on, but also an adventure that he would be able to find these free materials on the streets, create with them something new and beautiful, and put them to use in a way that they wouldn't be just, lying in a gutter as litter. And he also grew up in a very underprivileged part of Chicago. And so he had some traumatic experience in his life that led him to sort of have a rebirth as this Mr. Imagination character. So we like to show this picture because it can really introduce students to the eccentricities of this artist. And we can ask, what do you notice about him in comparison to his artworks? And he clearly really is very closely tied to his artworks and his artistic persona as well. So it's just a really fun image to show. But we also like to ask students, why do they think we collected this artwork for our collection? It's something that's made of discarded materials, not necessarily fine art that, as we might think of it, but we have prioritized this object to be a part of our collection. So why do students think we want this? Why is this so important to telling the story of American art? And so that's a question that we ask a lot in our Found Objects lesson is this art? Why is this art? Why do we want this? Why is this so special? And what story does it tell because of its materials? So I'm going to hop back to that list after just a quick bite into Found Objects. And then Becky, I think you said Lure of the West?
Yes, that was one of the topics that was mentioned. So Lure of the West being one of our history topics, we have tried to pull out artworks from our collection that can help explore both the myth and the people, lifestyles, the landscape of the 19th century West. And so that we can, look at history from an art perspective, which is kind of an interesting way to look at it. This artwork is a good example of the kind of artworks that we might use. It is created at the time of the westward migration. And so we can go through and ask a number of these questions about the artwork. We can have a conversation, colors, sides of the artwork, what is being referenced or what is the story. There's a lot that is going on in this particular artwork. It is by a white artist, and that last question is also an important question for us to examine in this particular topic, the different people who are in this artwork and who aren't in this artwork. And so we can look at the experience of the migration west, including both the white immigrant experience as well as the experience for the American Indians or the people who lived in what was part of Spain that then became part of the United States and Mexico. So we can tell a pretty broad picture. We can use artworks, we can use photographs to look at the landscape. We can look at the changes. We can use artworks to talk about the changes that people experienced as they were going west or as their land was invaded. We can talk about technology and trains and other things that carried people west. So we can cover a lot of different bases in this particular topic. And as I said, it's a nice way to integrate looking at artworks with topics or material that they may be covering in other classes. And so if you're trying to do something that's interdisciplinary, this can work really well for that.
Great. Thanks, Becky.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think I heard America's Signs and Symbols.
Mm-hmm.
So we can go to that. And so one thing that we can do for this topic is that we have a lot of artworks about the Statue of Liberty, or that feature the Statue of Liberty in them. So we can do a whole exploration of that symbol, starting out with some of the history. So this is actually a model for the Statue of Liberty. And we can talk a little bit about those people who were behind it. So who the person who who got the idea, who did the research for it, then the artists and artisans who ultimately created it, on to the process of actually designing it and application for a patent. So all of this sort of technical background that had to go into physically making the Statue of Liberty. And then we can look at the way that the Statue of Liberty has been used by artists in artwork since her creation. So for example, here's one artwork made by an artist named Fanny Peet. It's a wall hanging and it's made of yarn. And here it's a pretty simple version of the Statue of Liberty, but we still recognize her. So we can ask students why. What's here that helps us recognize her? And we can, get towards the iconic crown and torch as these signifiers that we always recognize her as long as we can see those things. And then we can look at other examples such as this artwork, which is sort of an assemblage artwork that's made of lots of different materials, not one material like that first one. And that's showing us a new version of the Statue of Liberty with a lot more detail. And this is made by a Puerto Rican artist who immigrated to this country and would use materials that both he found and materials that were sort of inspired by his history as a Puerto Rican in his works of art. And then maybe we can look at yet another example of the Statue of Liberty in art. So we've got a lot of different images and artworks in different mediums that use this iconography for different reasons. So this one is a celebration of sort of America that centers the Statue of Liberty in it. And so it's showing us a beauty contest at the bottom, but it has the Statue of Liberty as a huge symbol right in the middle. So in our America Signs and Symbols topic, we talk about lots of different symbols in this way, where we can explore how different artists use them, how the meaning of that symbol is referenced to tell different stories in different artists' eyes. Here's another really interesting example where we see her on her side. She's almost like flying on a mission. Looks like she's shooting magnet beams out of her torch. So this is a really fun version of the Statue of Liberty, but we still can understand that she's the Statue of Liberty, even if we don't have that text on the bottom that tells us she is. Even though it's moving farther and farther away from the original, we're still seeing that symbol of America being used in an interesting and creative way. So that's one tidbit from America Signs and Symbols.
As we go back to the list, and I know there are a few other topics that you all were curious about, I should let you know that these topics are available for third, fourth, or fifth, depending on the topic, up through high school. They don't have specific artworks that go with these particular topics. And so there is a little bit of customizing, of tweaking and tailoring that can be done for each of these topics, both depending on the grade level that you want to have connect with us for the topic, and also based on your particular interests. Our volunteer presenters have been trained to be able to look through the collection, pull out artworks that fit with a particular theme, a particular focus that you have. If you're starting a unit, you're in the middle of a unit, at the end, they can adjust what they pull for the conversation that they have with your students. And so you don't get something that is off the shelf, like the same set of 5 or 7 artworks for everybody. So it really is we try to be responsive to your needs within our collection, what our collection can support, and what you're interested in. So that is something that's a little bit different about what we offer versus something that you might get from other sites.
Thanks for that clarification, Becky.
Mm-hmm. We also had interest in To See Is to Think and American Indians.
Sure. So how about we do those two, and then we'll move on to talk about our other resources. Just looking at time. Okay, so To See Is to Think is a really broad topic that's sort of generally just based on the theme of helping students to explore different elements of art, different ways that artists create moods and stories and build narratives through their art. It's all about breaking down artworks and learning how to look, in a sense. And so this is an example of an exercise that might be used in this lesson, because our different presenters are all going to use very different artworks for this topic in particular, because it's such a broad topic. But here's one exercise that I think is really powerful for getting at the themes of this. So what we would ask students to do, or what our presenter might ask, is to just have like a piece of paper out and pen and not show the artwork yet, but then say, as soon as I show you this artwork, I want you to take your pen and put it on your paper in the location of like the first thing that your eye catches on this artwork and make a circle. Draw a circle on the first thing that catches your eye. Then I want you to trace out the path that your eye took. So as I'm talking you through this, I'll just demonstrate sort of what I might do if I was a student who was drawing this. So let's make that circle and then trace the path that your eye took on your paper. So however you wandered through it. Then we'd ask students, let's look at this as if this were geometric shapes. So let's say that we look for where there are triangular things in this artwork and draw a triangle in the general location of each of those objects. So maybe your students would end up drawing a row of triangles across the top. We'd say, what kind of shapes did the people take? So maybe we'd add some rectangles. And they're all doing this sort of on their own as we're talking through it. Then we look at shades, right? So take the side of your pencil and darken the darkest area in this artwork, and then make the second darkest area a little bit gray, all on your paper. So start adding shade to this. And then I want to go ask the students to go back to the first thing that their eye noticed. Now that we've sort of broken down the whole thing and we can talk about it as a group, well, what's the first thing that you noticed? And what's the first thing that you noticed? And ask the students why. Why do you think that's where your eye went? Now that we've had an opportunity to look through this whole thing and look at the different shades, the different shapes that we're seeing, where did your eye go and why do you think that was? And so we can start to explore how these different elements of the painting, its color, its contrast, its shape, how those are being used to move our eyes through them. So again, this is a topic that I think our presenters are all going to do very differently because it is such a broad topic, but that's just one example of the focus on sort of elements of art that you might get when you request this topic. And like Becky said, there's definitely a degree of customization. So it's the kind of thing that you could talk about with your presenter to share what you might want to explore in terms of elements of art and what they are interested in exploring with you. And then I think we had American Indians.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sorry, just let me get to my notes. A second. So here we have two paintings, and these are both made by a white artist named George Catlin. So he's an artist who's very famous for painting lots and lots of artworks of American Indians in the mid 1800s. And so when we talk about Catlin, we always like to make it very clear that Catlin's telling the story that he wants to tell about these individuals. So these are not, unbiased accounts of Native Americans. He had a bit of an agenda that he carried with him when he made these portraits he sort of wanted to promote the protection of Native life the way that he thought it should be promoted. So when we talk about this topic, we're trying to always be sensitive about whose eyes we're sort of looking through. But in the instance of these two portraits, we're seeing two members of two different tribes. And these are portraits that are representing powerful members of the community. And we like to ask students to look at how the artist is capturing them and what qualities he's revealing in these individuals. And what's he doing to highlight those qualities? So how are we being shown qualities of leadership or of power? What elements of their personalities are we learning from these two images? And there's other artworks by Catlin that we could also use to explore elements of Native life in the region that he was painting at the time, which is sort of largely the Plains region. But we also really like to showcase artworks made by American Indian artists themselves. And so here is an artwork made by an artist named Awa Tisre. And she's a Pueblo artist I don't actually know the gender of this artist, but this artist is male. He is a Pueblo artist. I thought I was wrong when I said that. I was like, that sounds wrong. Is a artist who paints symbols that are locally found in Native cultures of that region. And so this here is an artwork that's full of symbols that we can unpack with students and ask, what they think these symbols might represent. We can talk about how some of these symbols have found their way into the larger iconography of this region. So we have this sun shape that's found in the New Mexican flag. The different animals here and why those animals are important to this culture, why they found their way into Tisra's artwork. And then we can also show artworks that speak to some of the tragic occurrences that have happened surrounding Native Americans in this country, and the way that they've been treated by white Americans. So this is an artwork by a Native artist named John Quick-to-See Smith. And we like to ask students what words they see on this artwork. They'll start reading out some of the state names. And we ask them what's missing. What do they not see in this artwork? And the link between the things that are missing are that the words that are missing are words that don't come from native languages. So all of the states that are on here have names that have roots in native languages. And we like to ask students about the colors on this artwork, the dripping of the artwork, what emotions does that evoke for them? And there we have a video clip of the artist speaking about this artwork and how for her it's representing the tragedy, the loss of these cultures, that these are cultures that were across the country that were then, forced through violence into small reservations and who were sort of taken away from their places, their native homes. And so this artwork is expressing that grief at the loss of place, and also thinking about language and the languages that surround us, the fact that we might not even realize that we live in a state that has a name from a native language. So it's a really powerful artwork. And we love that we have a video clip of her speaking so that we can actually bring her into the lesson and let students hear from her voice. All right. So again, because there's, lessons are being taught by different presenters, we're just representing some of the artworks that we know our presenters like to use, that we think are great examples of the kind of topics that they would teach. Each lesson that you would receive is going to have many more artworks than just the one or two we were able to share today. And our collection is really deep in all of these areas. So there's a lot of different artworks for our presenters to draw on.
So one important detail before we go on to the other resources that are available to you is, how do you get these programs? They are free. We will meet with multiples of your class. And the way to request them is through a website called the Center for Interactive Learning and Collaboration. And when you look on the live binder, we've collected links to all of our resources. And so you don't have to necessarily write down the link here, but you can find the link to our page on CILC there and find all of our topics with descriptions. And so you can decide which topics you're interested in and place your requests on that website. You can also find information about all of our offerings on our website at the link that is on this slide, or also on the live binder resources page.
And so we then just wanted to wrap up by exploring some of the other resources that SAM has available to teachers online. So beyond just our lessons that you can request through this website, we also have asynchronous resources that you can access on our website that can be used in lots of other ways in your classroom. So we have links to a lot of this content in the live binder. We wanted to do a quick little rundown of some of the other resources that are available for you all. So one thing that we have on our website, and again, these links are going to be in that live binder, we have curricular resources. So lesson plans that are specifically formulated to fit certain standards that are on specific topics. So here's just one example, is a topic called critical thinking in action. And on our website, they're all broken down by, what you can expect in that lesson plan. It's going to be a series of artworks with questions and activities and ways to integrate them into your classroom. So that's one really great resource that we have available on our website for you all, is these sort of pre-made resources meant to fit into your curriculums. We also have a really great resource that's called American Experience in the Classroom, and it's a web resource that's intended to bring artworks from SAM into different parts of the American experience through history. So it helps contextualize some of our artworks in different moments along different themes of American history. So this is something that might be helpful if you are trying to integrate some of that historical content into your art teaching, or you want to link together some artworks based on a certain theme. So like we'll have different themes in there that will share artworks that are from different time periods around one theme, or in the historical eras, artworks from one time period that have a variety of themes. So this is a really interesting resource that also has a cool timeline to it. This is a Smithsonian-wide resource called the Learning Lab. And Learning Lab is really incredible because it's a website that has all of the open access images. So all of the images and primary resources that Smithsonian museums have digitized and have made freely accessible are all collected into this one website. And you can make a free account, and you can either build your own collections of resources. So putting in search terms like maybe pottery, and then you'll look at everything that comes up for pottery, and you can explore and pull together a collection of artworks on pottery. Or you can look at collections that others have already made. So this is a screenshot of Sam's Learning Lab launch page. And our educators have put together collections of artworks around certain themes. You can add slides and text to it. So our educators have added activities or questions to their collections, and you can do the same if you make your own. So Learning Lab is a really great resource for sort of crowdsourcing and building off of each other's expertise. And when you put together your collection, it ultimately serves as kind of like a binder, in a sense, of images that you can work with. So this is a screenshot of a Learning Lab that a former colleague made on artworks that show the solar system. And when you click on each one of these, you'll be able to see more information about it. So you can add your own text to it, and it will also have the tombstone information about what that artwork is. So Learning Lab is another really great resource for teachers.
We also have a number of other resources available online, including videos of interviews of contemporary artists that are represented in our collection. You can search by artist, but you can we've also pulled together playlists, and they fall into such categories as artists responding to pivotal events or engaging with the environment, exploring identity and representation. And so it can be really powerful in your own classroom to pull in the voice of an artist, usually speaking in front of the artwork that is here in Sam's collection, and to get their thoughts about why they added something to the artwork or what they were trying to do with a particular artwork. So that's really a powerful, nice resource that you can find. We also have a number of different professional development opportunities, both that we are offering currently, some of which are in person, but some of which are available online, so you can register and attend via Zoom. Nice, so you don't have to come to DC to attend. But since the pandemic, we have also offered a number of professional development opportunities that have been recorded, and so you can look back through the library and find out what particular topics have been covered. Our educator that offers those topics has done a really sensitive job of trying to meet teachers, offer ways that teachers can connect with what's going on in their classroom, responding to different themes that have been brought up by George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement, social emotional learning. And so you can look back through there and watch those on your own time. The professional development sessions that are being offered currently that are live, I believe they're free. They may have a very minimal charge, like maybe $10. So they're definitely worth checking out. We also have a Learn from Home page that has a number of different resources available on it, everything from activities that especially younger students can do. We don't have a whole lot for the K or pre-K through second grade set, but some of the resources on the Learn from Home page would fit for that particular audience. You can also find some professional development opportunities that have happened during the pandemic on there. So there's a lot of different learning from home, doing from home activities, guides that you can give students for doing art making at home, those kinds of things. So that also is available on our website. Links to all of those things on the resources page. Next slide, Allie. We also have an open access initiative at the Smithsonian. And so all of the resources that you have seen before now are related to just Smithsonian American Art Museum and our collection. This particular initiative is something that the entire Smithsonian, so all of the museums, dinosaurs, history, the Wright brothers, airplane, the Smithsonian as a whole has been working on digitizing its collections to make it easier to access them. And so if you are interested in finding artifacts or works anywhere in the Smithsonian, this would be the place to come. I should say that Learning Lab also has a search engine where you can find artifacts, artworks, etc., documents that are within the entire Smithsonian's collection. And so if you are trying to do something cross-curricular where you want to pull in something historical and an artwork and something science related, you can pull all of those things together in that location. And somebody asked about searching our collection, and the last resource I have to share with you is our collection. So I want to say at least 85% of our collection has been digitized, and we have permission, copyrights and things worked out to be able to share those artworks online. And so, yes, your students can search our collection. They can find high resolution images that are available for you to download, to put in your own, your own teaching resources that students can use in their own work, and they're all available for use for free. Sometimes with a credit to the museum or copyright, but they are all available there for you to find. So there's a number of different ways that you can search the collection: artist, topic, subject matter. There's a wealth of information there. So that also is available to you. There we go. Quick run through all of those things. But as I said, all the links are available on that resource document. Thanks to Tom for dropping that in the chat.
I just wanted to leave our emails up on the screen for you. But that brings us to the end of our presentation. So we'd be happy to answer any questions. If you have any questions that you haven't had a chance to ask, or contact either of us at any time if you think of any questions. And again, that live binder should have links to pretty much everything we talked about today, because I know we threw a lot of opportunities at you all. So.
Thank you. That was very cool. That was really great.
It's amazing. I'd say, wow, look at all those free resources at your fingertips. it's almost to the point that it's a little overwhelming because there's so much there.
My kiddos are
yes.
K2, but that's
Let me just add that if you are feeling a little overwhelmed, please feel free to email me or Becky and say, this is what I'm doing. Do you have any advice about where to look? And, we'd be happy to offer our opinion on maybe what topic you might want to request, or, if there's video that we could think of, that we want to point you towards. So please do reach out.